For those of you on the webcast, I was just saying good afternoon. So my name is Andrew Bybee. I'm a principal program manager with the Dynamics CRM team. I was saying I want to thank everybody for coming out, because certainly 4:45 on day 3 of PDC, I was saying that I was seeing maybe some fizzled heads across the audience here. So thank you, number one. Number two, thank you for those of you that have already spent some time and invested in Dynamics CRM. We're very happy and appreciative of the time that you're spending there, and we hope that you're getting value out of that. For those of you that are here that are maybe curious and that are hoping to sort of get the low-down dirt on the product and how you actually build things there, again, welcome. We hope that you'll get some information out of this. This is technically what I would normally think of as a 400-level session or an expert session. I hope we're going to spend enough time writing code and showing you sort of real working stuff that your attention is held and wrapped. So we'll see about going through there. We're going to do the demo in a couple of different parts today. Later on, we'll have Nirav Shah come up. He's actually one of our development leads with the product team, and so we're excited to have him here. And we also have some special surprise guests later on in the session. So a couple of things in terms of objectives for today. What do we hope that you guys can get out of this? Number one, primarily it's about being able to demonstrate for you as application developers. Now, you may be doing it as an ISV, you may be doing it as a corporate IT developer, but really it's about how we can show you and try to demonstrate for you the rapid development capabilities for business applications with the Dynamics CRM capabilities. So hopefully we'll demonstrate that in spades, and if we don't, then let us know how we can sort of help push that forward. Second, and we're excited about this, you saw maybe a little bit of this for those of you who maybe attended one of the earlier sessions we had on Monday around Dynamics CRM, but we are going to spend a little bit of time showing you some of our vNext product. Again, caveat, it's very, very early days with vNext. We're super excited. There's some key things we want to show you guys, and so we're hopeful that you'll get excited about it too. But it is very early days, so you may see the occasional crash, the occasional thing that you see when you're actually in the middle of a development cycle. And then finally, and if there's really only one thing for everyone to take away today, it's really about just trying to think different, right? We're still focusing on Dynamics CRM as the brand, but in terms of its value to you guys as ISVs, really I want you to think about this notion of XRM, and what does the X stand for? Is it X as a variable? Is it X for extreme? Hey, I'm all down for either one of those, but it's really about being able to recognize that CRM is really tailored towards some particular types of application patterns that are focused on people and process and how you pull those together and to really give yourself sort of a unified view across your company. So this is where we're going to be spending time today. We'll come back to these points, but hopefully, again, we'll get into these pretty quickly. Now, I'm going to spend some time on this first one. We're going to get into code here very quickly, but one of the things I did want to spend just a minute on with everybody in the room is really about understanding where CRM comes into the value proposition and how we're trying to really think about it. So this is really about a build versus buy decision for a lot of you. Now, what does that mean? Well, build, there's a lot of capabilities. We've seen a lot of those out there at the conference over the last 3 days, right? You can go down to raw SQL, you can go to .NET. You can spend your time building things from the very ground up, right? What are you doing when you're trying to do that? Well, you're trying to actually support a business process. So in this case, we see a recruiting process with potentially some multiple roles that come into play with that, a candidate, a recruiter, a hiring manager. But what are you trying to actually get done? Right? You're trying to automate the business. Now, you can do that by building from scratch, or you can also do that by buying some sort of off-the-shelf product. Now, again, you could probably reach those project objectives either way, either building or buying. But the question for you as an ISV is, what kind of expectations are you going to bring to the mix? So when we talk about some of the value here, we're going to be focusing on things like how can you quickly prototype? Right? It's one thing to be able to quickly put a basic ASP.NET data-driven application together. It's another thing to actually say it's a enterprise-ready application that can start to scale out on a global basis. Right? There's a difference of degree there that's fairly significant. It's also one thing to start thinking about from an architecture perspective. Are you actually architecting your solution to actually survive and really flourish over multiple releases and to take on additional requirements and scope from the customer? And then finally, as developers, as what I would say maybe hardcore geeks, this is really about how we can start to build credibility and trust with our customers by getting things done on time, even ahead of time, and under budget. So when we start thinking about what is the solution that we're putting together, again, real quick, use this as a frame because we're going to be using this for the next 40 minutes as we go through demos here. we're talking about a solution. That solution is something that multiple people are interacting with. You may have some modeling that you need to do, right? So if you're thinking about what you're hearing from Oslo and the rest of the modeling, this is the wave, right? Model-driven development is the wave. So we think about, how do I model things like candidates and the notion of an application or a position, right? These are data elements that I need to be able to access inside of my application. I may have a default user interface or user experience. I may want to extend that user experience with something custom that I can write that's above and beyond sort of that user experience that I come up with later. And then I may also want to put some custom process that goes into that. So this is more than just basic CRUD operations. I'm actually talking about really getting in and extending this with custom code. Now, where this really starts to get interesting is that, as we're seeing with the cloud services in Azure, this is really about starting to bring third-party cloud services into play. So how do you start to pull those in and start to have more of a two-way conversation about things like background checks and other external services? So what we're hoping to show you today is how can you actually start putting some of these solutions together for use inside of your organization, and extending that to things like communications and integration across the board. Okay, so great. So from this perspective then, today you would think about this as SQL, about .NET, about ASP or XAML, you see WPF. And now the question is what is that difference of degree between that and actually writing an enterprise app? Real quick, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail, but think about things like workflow. You saw WF, you saw Dublin. Great, Dublin's going to give you a workflow host that you don't get today with WF. What about if you are writing code today? You're going to have to go write your own WF host. What about security? What about reporting? Outlook, Office, communications, configuration UI. Are you going to spend time writing configuration UI when you're putting your app together? Think about deployment. What happens when I want to support things like web farms, right? And the ability to have my code split out across different server roles or working in a DMZ. What happens when I want to actually scale these things out, either taking advantage of multi-core processors or thinking of different multi-site development? And then what happens when I want to start thinking about incorporating this into capabilities like System Center? What happens if I come up with things out of band and maybe the customer wants to extend some of these things? And what happens when, lo and behold, I get V2 of this project and I actually want to come back and think about an upgrade for that existing solution? So all of those things are things that you're going to have to spend time on one way or the other. If you're going to build that in .NET, these are all things that are going to take away from your budget to go and build stuff that you're actually getting paid to do by the customer. So ultimately, when we talk about rapid application development, it's not just about how quickly can you pop up a form. It's really about how quickly can you get to really an enterprise scale application that you can really go and drive into an organization. So with that, again, very quickly, let me go ahead and flip over and show you just some highlights. Now, again, it's a 400-level session. There's going to be a bunch that I'm not going to spend a lot of time on. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the basic CRM set of capabilities, but what I will show is a couple of things. Number one, so we've got our recruiting solution. Now, one of the things that we have to do with our recruiting solution is we want to make sure that I can actually submit my interest in a job online. So that's great. I'm going to go ahead and put my career site up here. Now, I've got my first name. This is all very sort of basic, ASP-driven development. So I can go ahead and put in some names here. I'll put in an email address. And then I can go ahead and choose a location. Let's say it's in Bellevue. And I can go ahead and say that I'm interested in this solution specialist job in Bellevue. So I can go ahead and submit that. Again, this is a very sort of straightforward portal, right? And my customers would come in, they would be using this. Now the question, if you're going to build this yourself, is where does the data go? Now, if I'm not using CRM, I have to go and construct some SQL database, and maybe I've got a membership provider for ASP.NET. It's got to go somewhere. Great. So now the SQL data is there. How do I get to it, right? Where do I actually put those things together? Okay, so right, said thanks. This is we see 1,000 of these experiences across the web today. Now let's take a look and let's think about what happens when I actually want to now navigate to where CRM comes into this play. So I've taken this data, and now I'm going to go ahead and look at what happens when I can use CRM as the back end for some of these key capabilities. So a couple of things. Familiar CRM experience here. What we've done is we've extended the navigation, obviously with a sitemap change, so that we can actually have a section just for our recruiting solution, right? I've added some custom entities here for contacts, for positions, for applications, for interview feedback. You'll notice that contacts, we already had a schema for contacts in CRM. Now again, as an ISV, if you're building these things, or as an IT developer, if you're building these things, You could come up with your own contact schema, but if all those attribution and all those capabilities are already there, why not take advantage of that? So if I look, I can go ahead and say, well, let me take a look at the other piece here, which is that you'll notice I have a task that's been created here. How did this task get created? Well, let me take a look at this. Now, the task is a task, fairly bland and uninteresting from that perspective, but how did this thing actually get created? Well, we noticed that it has regarding on here. Now again, regarding, there's some other data model pieces here that we need to take a look at. I can take a look and see that this application now has some other things associated with it. I have the task that's now related, so we're using, again, relational capabilities to start modeling tasks and other models that we have in the system. I can see that there was actually an email that got sent out thanking to the candidate to say, thank you very much for submitting your interest here. I have the notion of workflow. Now think about what we've been hearing with DubF and with Dublin and all the other sort of advances that we're pushing out here. What you've got in CRM is you've got a workflow host out of the box that scales, that works across server farms for async servers, right? So you've already got a host here. It's built on DubF. You can write DubF activities. Not only that, but you can actually author new DubF rules inside of the web UI. And I can now start to surface those web-based, web-authored rules inside of CRM as a base experience. So what you're looking at here is okay, so think about how much time you would have had to spend to write a DubF host. Think about how much time you would have had to spend to go and actually create the SQL models for doing those entities, right? All of that is time that you're not spending doing all the really sexy, cool stuff, right? So again, we're talking about sort of fast and easy here from being able to put these things together. Now, the other piece that we think about here is that when I think about how I get that data out, I have my data in SQL, I could go write SQL reporting services, somebody's got to go into Visual Studio and put those things together. Now, as a developer and as someone that's trying to meet a business application need, I could also go and look through and say, well, I wanted to add not only the recruiting management, but I also wanted to be able to actually help the recruiter sort of figure out, is this person a better fit for some other jobs that we might have that they might not have thought about. So you're talking about composing a solution at this point, right? We're composing. We've got our web portal front end. We've got CRM at one end. Now we're going to start putting together some other experiences. So I'm using workflow as part of composing my process automation here. And then I'm also going to come in and let's take a look at John Smith as a solution specialist. You'll notice that I have my workflow here. I can come in and I can say, well, let me look at a little bit more about John Smith, the candidate. And you'll notice that I have some relationship types here. I can start to use script support inside of the app to control some of the behaviors of the user interface here. So I can flip this back to candidate. I can now start to look and say, well, this person, is he willing to relocate? Let me check for other potential positions. Now, this is a custom ASP dialog that I've hosted that's inside of CRM. I'm starting to take the base CRM experience and extend it with other UI capabilities. You'll see there's no applications available. But if I start actually stipulating, I call John and I start stipulating what his skill sets are going to be, then something different is going to end up here. So now I can check for other potential positions, and you'll notice that he still doesn't have anything. Now I can look at, oh, now I've got this bug. All right. There you go. Oh, actually, you know what it was? This is the other thing. So now we've got a commit model here for being able to update these. I always run into this one. Now let me go ahead and look at a couple of things that popped up all of a sudden here. So number one, you'll notice that I've got this dialog now that's actually suggesting, it's going and basing it off of attribution on the contact and being smart and showing that in a custom dialog, right? So being able to actually show these, now I can click on these and actually create some other applications for this person. So now once the applications are actually built, you'll notice the other thing that shows up here. Now all of a sudden I've got a document repository for John. So I'm starting to compose not just CRM, but I'm starting to compose SharePoint in along with these things. Now again, a lot of you have probably built some of these things already. You've built applications like this. Really what I want you to take away is the idea that this ability to start composing your solution, to move out of this sort of false choice of, do I have to build everything in SQL and .NET, or do I have to go and buy this sort of static, non-configurable, out-of-box product? That's a false choice. Really what we want you to try and start pivoting around is to say, listen, there's a lot of value in having a highly configurable product that has capabilities that you can now start to bring in different ways to really meet your solution. Now, we're showing you this as an on-premise. I'm running all of this inside of a virtual PC. What we're going to do here in a second is we're going to have Nirav come up and we're going to show you some of the exciting things that we're focusing on for CRM5 and how that will then start to allow you to take some of that business logic and some of those capabilities and start to actually bring them in a partially trusted manner. So with that, again, just keep in mind this context and that composing capability across these solutions as we get into the next couple of demos. With that, let me go ahead and flip back. And what I'd like to go ahead and do then is let's chat a little bit about how some of these things are going to come forward inside of our next release of CRM. Right now, in our statement of direction, we've talked about this as vNext. You may hear me occasionally call it CRM5 in that imaginative code name mode of ours. So let's go ahead and have Nirav come up, and we'll have him talk through some of the pieces about CRM5. Nirav?
Thanks, Andy. So just a quick introduction. As Andy mentioned, I'm develop lead for CRM programmability. Previously, I was working on CRM Online, so I know a lot about how the cloud space there works in terms of CRM. And before that, I actually worked on a lot of the extensibility pieces that Visual Studio has been showing off over the last couple of days here. So I know about the extensibility pieces as well. But let's talk a little bit about what Andy just showed you in terms of how does the CRM architecture actually look? How do we make all that stuff that he just showed you actually come to fruition? So underneath, as Andy mentioned, we've got the SQL database, and that's hosting all the data that you've got. But it's also hosting all that metadata that's describing what your data looks like and the different restrictions for that data. And on top of that, we've built a data access layer that can run the business logic that you want to run. But we've also added a whole security system around that that's very discreet, that lets you control who's allowed to do what with the data and who's allowed to view it and interact with it. We've also built a really rich, scalable workflow host that you can use that you can leverage the workflow runtime that's been getting shown off over the last couple of days, and then you can extend it with your own custom activities using just standard extension mechanisms that workflow already provides. And on top of that, we've got a complete SDK that really lets you drive all of the data inside of the CRM application and the SQL database. And it's really a customizable SDK. So you can insert your own custom business logic that gets fired and executed before or after the actions happen in CRM. So you can implement the business rules the way you need them to act in your CRM system. And on top of that, you can build the custom portal applications like Andy just showed, or you can really extend the CRM application that already exists by modifying the forms that come out of the box, or add custom JavaScript to customize the user experience, or get reporting and Excel spreadsheets that really give you different views of the data that's already in CRM. So you don't have to build any of that from scratch. But with that said, let's talk a little bit about how are we extending this in the future with all these cloud services that you've been hearing about, and how with CRM Online, and how you can leverage the same capabilities and get even more out of the system as we look forward. So as you see, the slides went blue here. So we're talking about the future now and what we're thinking about for the next release of CRM. So one of the first things we talk about is in CRM on premises, you can run these your custom business logic and have it execute as part of the CRM. How do we get that to work in CRM Online, in the online environment? So we started thinking about this concept of a sandbox, where you can run partially trusted code in the CRM Online environment, or even on premises or a partner-hosted environment, but to not differentiate anymore where you're allowed to run your custom code. We also started thinking about transaction support and really giving you that capability to get that rich business logic and not have to manage all the synchronization or the manage kind of the state of the data and when it gets committed and things like that. We want to let you not think about all that stuff and just worry about really what you're trying to get done. And as you've seen over the last couple of days, a lot of stuff going on with the Internet Service Bus and cloud services. We really want to be able to start letting you guys leverage those capabilities from CRM and really start, mashing up the different services that exist out in the cloud and integrating them into your CRM application. And then, one of the common pain points we've seen is as we got all these different services kind of integrating with one another, how do we give end users that single sign-on experience and let you impersonate and delegate the privileges of the users so that you can create data on behalf of the users that are interacting with your service. And we're looking at using the Geneva STS capabilities that you've seen over the last couple of days in the next release of CRM to do some of that. So this sandbox, let's talk a little bit about how this sandbox works. So for those of you that have worked with CRM in the past, you already know about the SDK and the pipeline processing. But as I was mentioning earlier, for those of you that haven't used CRM, we've got this concept of an eventing framework that basically whenever you call into the CRM SDK, it's going to run through a set of steps and execute the code that gets corresponded with each step. So what we've done is we've kept that pipeline, but we've added this notion of the sandbox server. And as the pipeline goes through its set of steps, and it encounters a step that needs to get isolated and run in a partially trusted environment, it'll actually call out to the sandbox server, which is a brand new server role that gets installed with CRM. And as it calls out to the sandbox server, we've got the sandbox host service, which is really just there to monitor and check the state of the server itself and keep track of what's going on. It communicates through a WCF channel, and it's really just going to keep track of what's going on there. So as the execute comes across, the CRM SDK is going to pass the information about what code needs to get executed, what tenant it needs to get executed for, and the different pieces of information that needs to get passed into the code that's going to get executed. So the sandbox hosting service is going to go check to see if this code already exists on the machine, and if not, go retrieve it from the pipeline itself. And once it's got that code, it's going to call into these different worker processes. And the worker processes are another unit of isolation that we give the code. And that worker process, the worker process currently is isolated per tenant in your CRM deployment. So each tenant is going to get its own worker process. And that worker process, what it's going to do is it's going to spin up a new app domain that's restricted using CLR code access security. And that app domain is going to be locked down to only allow execution permissions. So once that app domain is created, it's going to load up your plugin and then let it execute. And as it executes, it can call back into the CRM SDK and build up that richer business logic that you want to build up. But in the future, we're looking at ways to start having that arrow point out to the .NET services and the live services and things like that, so you can really start building those richer and richer applications that you want to build using the new capabilities that have been getting shown off over the last couple days. And as we think about the sandbox server, we really wanted this to scale up to like the online service and things like that. So we really made it so that it can scale out, so you can add additional servers and things like that, so that we can really let lots of organizations come into play and start leveraging these capabilities. But enough of that. Let's start looking at some of the code that I'm sure you all want to see. We haven't really gotten a chance to see CRM 5 yet, so let's take a look at some of the stuff that we're getting there. Let's just log in here. So as Andy mentioned, this is really early build of CRM 5, so please bear with me if we run into some hiccups along the way, but I think you'll be excited by some of the stuff that I'm about to show you. So the first thing I want to show you is, we've got this concept of solutions now. The solutions give you a way to partition up the different customizations that you've done in the CRM application. So you can see here, I've got the recruiting solution that Andy was showing you earlier. It's got the same set of entities that he was showing you and the same set of customizations. So it's got the application, candidate, position, things like that. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to add a new set of capabilities in CRM that build on top of the recruiting infrastructure that he had already added. So I've added this offer management solution. And it's really dependent on the solution that's already installed. And this has some new capabilities like level, an offer manager role. So let's take a quick look at what these guys actually have. So if we look at level, and look at what customizations I've done to it. It's got some basic data about title, maximum salary, minimum salary, mean salary, things like that you need to know to really present the offer to the candidate when they've been accepted after the interview. Then we've got the concept of an offer. If we look at what the offer has, it's got some very basic data as well. It's got relationship over to the level in the application that was used in the recruiting solution. But it's also got the salary amount and the compensation ratio that you want to give the candidate as part of their offer. So that's great. So we've got the solution, we've got it published. I've also created this offer manager role that's part of my solution. And this comes back to that security notion that we were talking about earlier. I've added this and given this role the specific capabilities to really interact with the offer and level entities that I just created. So no one else in the system other than the offer managers can really start interacting with the offers and levels. To do this, with custom code, you'd have to write all that logic yourself. But really, I just did this with a couple of clicks. After I created the role, I just clicked on the circle and gave them the appropriate set of permissions I wanted, and it was ready to go. So that's great. So we've got the solution all ready to go. So let's go back to the recruiting section. You'll see that the offers and levels are there. I've added some levels just to speed up the process a little bit. But let's take a look at the new offer form. So you'll see here that it's got the same set of data that I was showing you earlier, but the amount is read-only. So really what this is doing is it's going to take the compensation ratio, link to the levels, and figure out what the amount should be based on the compensation ratio. We don't want people to arbitrarily enter that information because our business rules are very stringent, and we want to be able to make sure that people aren't making mistakes and offering people the wrong amount of money. So let's take a look at how this gets built. So as I mentioned, we've got this plugins capability, and we've extended that to run so that you can leverage it in the CRM Online environment and run in partial trust. So to do that, we've added this new interface that's the isolatable plugin. And by implementing this simple interface with a simple one method, you can basically get yourself ready to run into the CRM Online environment. So I've written this plugin that's going to compute the salary based on the compensation ratio and the level that that offer is linked to, and update the entity with that information. So let's take a look at what this does. So the execute method, all it's going to do is it's going to go pull out the offer, get the information around the compensation ratio, and go retrieve the level from the CRM SDK. Once it's got that level, it's going to actually go retrieve out the maximum salary, the minimum salary, and the mean salary for that level. Once it's got that information, it's going to do some calculation to determine what the average salary based on that compensation ratio should be offered to the candidate. And if it exceeds the max value that has that level, we're going to actually throw an exception back to the end user. Once we do that, we'll check to ensure that the salary actually meets the minimum, and if it doesn't, then we'll bump it up to the minimum because we don't want anyone to get shortchanged in that. So that was simple enough. It's probably 30 lines of code that I've written to do some simple validation and do some calculation on the CRM server, and we should be ready to go. Let's go back to the solution real quick. So if we look at the offers, we saw that it was linked to an application. The application, if we go look at it, has a status with it, and one of the status choices is actually offered. So what I want to do is I want to actually, when the offer gets created, update the status to be offered so that all my data stays in sync with one another. So how am I going to do that? So I've got a second plugin, again, very simple. It's going to implement that isolatable plugin interface, and what it's going to do is it's going to go retrieve the application. It's going to do some simple validation on it down here, you'll see. It's going to check the state of the application, see if it's already inactive. If it's already been active, we shouldn't be creating offers on that application. And it's also going to check the status code of it to see if it's already got an offer associated with it. If it's got an offer associated, we don't want to send the candidate multiple offers and give them a confusing message. So we're going to actually take care of this in our business logic itself. Once we've validated that that's the case, we'll actually go ahead and update the application status so that it's marked as offered. Simple enough, again, probably 30 lines or so of code, and I've got this logic ready to go and add it to my CRM system. Great, so I've done that. So how do I get it into the CRM system? So for those of you that have written plugins before, you know about the plugin registration tool. This is the tool that we can use to go ahead and install plugins onto the CRM application. As you can see here, this one's been updated for CRM 5, and it lets you actually authenticate with Active Directory or Windows Live ID so that you can actually register your plugins in the online environment. In this case, I'm going to use the AD connection. And what this is doing is now it's going to go connect up to the CRM deployment, and it's actually going to go find all the organizations that I can potentially go register my code with. It found that I have 2 orgs that I can actually register my code with. And so I'm going to actually go connect to my Contoso organization. You can see here that even though I've got two orgs, I can actually register my code to only run on a particular tenant if I want in the CRM or in the CRM environment. I don't have to make it so that all of the tenants have to execute the same business logic. It's really isolated to the tenant that I want executing this business logic, so they can all be very different from one another. So as it's calling into the Contoso org, it's retrieving all the information about what the potential places I can register plugins are. So you'll see here I've added the two plugins already into the system. If we look at the compute salary plugin, you'll see that it's going to go execute on the create of the new offer. Again, as you can see here, the plugin registration tool has actually gone into the organization, looked up all the different metadata that we've got, and actually lets you register your code on new extensions that you added into the system. It doesn't have to be just out-of-the-box entities that we've got. And this one's actually going to run outside of the transaction. It wants to just do the calculation and add it to the entity. No need to start the transaction before we do that computation. There was no need there. However, if we look at the other plugin that I've got, the update application, this one actually runs after the offer has been created inside the transaction. Now this is a new capability that we've added in the next version. In previous releases, if you wanted to do something like this, you'd have to actually register it to run outside of the transaction and then kind of manage the state if something failed yourself. If the update to the account status failed, you'd have to actually go manage how to roll back the account, create, and things like that. By just registering this plugin to run inside the transaction, all of that's taken care of for me automatically by the CRM system itself. I don't have to go manage the rollback and the validity of the data in the system anymore. So let's go and actually go create an offer. So I'm going to open up the new offer form here. It might take a second as I'm running on a VPC image. So I'll go ahead, create a new offer. And you'll see here that I can go ahead and enter for Jim Smith. And I'm going to go give him a level that I want to offer him. And this, again, is going to drive what salary I can actually give Jim Smith. So I'm going to say he's a software dev 3. And I'm going to link him to the application that he originally had, which was Jim Smith for Azure development. And just real quick, if I give him a compensation ratio that's way too high, the business rules that I've entered when I customize the entity already define what the limits are there, so it's not going to let me do anything obscure like that. But I'll give him, he was a good candidate. He had great interview feedback, so I'm going to give him 0.95. So now I'm going to go ahead and save. And what this is doing under the covers is it's actually going to go fire off the pipeline, and that pipeline's going to, sorry about that. It will work the next time. So what it's going to do is it's actually going to go through that pipeline, and as it goes through that pipeline, it's going to find that there's those sandbox plugins that I just registered earlier. And as it determines that it finds those sandbox plugins, it's going to call out to the sandbox service, to that sandbox host, and tell it to start executing these plugins in partial trust. So it's going to go to that hosting manager, and the hosting manager is going to spin off the worker process and to execute these plugins. Now, it takes a little bit of time to get through the process because we're calling back into the SDK a couple times, and it's spinning off to the sandbox a couple times, and all in the same process. We're working through some of the performance issues here, but you'll see eventually that it does come back and do all the computation that we expect it to do and update the application to have the offered status as well. So I'll show real quickly that while this is going on, if you look at the plugin registration tool, we actually use the same capabilities inside the CRM product itself. If you look here, we've got this Microsoft CRM object model. So the whole SDK itself is actually built using this eventing framework and the pipeline processing that I'm showing you here that we allow ISVs to extend with. So you'll see here now that the sandbox plugins have completed executing and that I've got the amount for the salary filled in. And if I go to the application, we'll see that it's also been updated to have the status of offered. That's great. So let me close out of this. If you recall, I actually registered the second plugin to be inside the transaction. So let me just go create a new offer real quick. And I'll go ahead and offer it to Jim Smith again. and I'm going to go give them the same title and link it to the same application. Now this application already has the offered status on it, but some other recruiting managers come in and he's created a new offer for the same candidate that already has an offer. To not confuse the system or to maintain the integrity of the data in our system, we're going to run through the same set of plugins, and eventually this is going to come back and show me that the status of that application is already offered, so it's not going to let me create this. So again, it's going to take a couple seconds here to get through the system to actually fire off the different plugins back to the sandbox server. But as I was mentioning earlier, as that's going on, the whole extensibility process that we've got here is actually leveraged completely by the CRM system itself. And as I start talking about that, of course, it comes back and gives me that error message that I'd thrown from my plugin itself, so that you can see that the offer can't get created because the application already has an offer. So because that was in the transaction, the offer is not actually created yet. So if you see that when I close this, it's actually going to say that this hasn't been created where you want to do. Previously, if you had tried that with CRM4, the offer would have actually already been created by the time it got to your plugin, so you'd have to actually either go do some processing to delete the offer after the fact, or you'd have to just let the status of the application, stay as new or whatever it was prior to the offer getting created. But now all of that's managed by CRM itself. Great. So we talked about the code access security real quick. So let's say, in the CRM online environment, we've actually got some plugins that are trying to do some bad things, or some potentially on purpose, potentially by accident. So what are some things you can do to start figuring out what's going on and what does the system do to manage this? So one of the things we do is, here I've got a plugin that's going to try to write to the event log, which is not which requires full trust. Because we're running in the sandbox, this is going to fail with a security exception. So one of the things we've done is we've introduced the concept of a tracing service that you can use from your plugins to actually keep track of what's going on to diagnose the issues. Obviously, in the online environment, you don't have access to the servers. You can't really write to the event log and see what's going on. And so what we've done is introduce this concept so you can keep track of what's going on in your plugin and kind of diagnose based on the information that you've written out yourself. And then I've got the second plugin that is much, much worse. It actually just goes and tries to kill the process it's running in. Clearly, this is bad, and we don't want this executing in CRM online environment, damaging the data center. So what are some of the things we do to prevent this? So I'll just close this guy out and discard my changes. So you'll see here I've got those same two plugins that I just showed you, registered to run when an account is created and when a lead is created. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go create a new lead into the system, and I just use this to track new candidate opportunities for Smith and Smith Consulting. Now I'm going to save it, and you'll see that when this plugin runs, it's actually going to throw back that trace information to the user. So I've got that same error message that I showed, but now in the dialog, it's actually giving me all the trace information that I wrote out. So I can actually take this and use this to figure out why did my plugin fail and what can I do to prevent this failure in the future. Obviously, the dialog's not the friendliest. We're making it cleaner as we work on it, but the general idea is to give you that information so that you can use it correctly. So let me close out of this guy. And let's go create an account to see what that other plugin that actually just tries to kill the process does. What happens with that guy? So I'm going to go to my accounts grid and create a new account. And I'll just call it malicious account. And it's going to save, and it's going to try to kill the process that the plugin's running in. Here you'll see that we get an unexpected error because the plugin did something that it wasn't supposed to. But you'll also see that if I keep trying to save this, I'll save it a couple times, and we'll get that error a couple times. But as we're doing this, we're actually building up profile information about the plugin that's running and what it's trying to do to the system. And after a couple of attempts of this and a couple of times of it's trying to kill its own process, we're actually going to disable the plugin assembly itself and report that this plugin is no longer allowed to execute in our environment.
Magical fifth.
It's supposed to be now? No, it doesn't seem to be doing it. Of course, it stops working when I start demoing it. All right. But what it's actually doing behind the scenes is actually building up profile information about the plugin assembly, keeping track of the failures, the resource consumption that it's using in the system, and as it's doing that, determining how malicious it is and disabling it in our system. So I'm going to flip back to the slides now and just kind of recap real quickly what we saw. So we saw that in CRM 5, you can use the transactions on the CRM server from within your plugins to really maintain the integrity of your data. This works on CRM data, and it doesn't really distribute across multiple systems, but it at least lets you manage the system itself to ensure that the data that you're creating doesn't have to get managed by your own code. Some of you that have written plugins in the past will recognize that there are some caveats to this with nested pipelines. So if you're supposed to run outside of the transaction, you might still get run inside a transaction based on what other plugins inside the transactions are doing. And that custom web service proxies aren't going to pass the transaction context through to the CRM SDK. So you'll have to use the CRM service that's returned from the plugin execution context that we hand to you. We also saw that the sandbox has a security mechanism that we use with code access security, and we've really layered that security on top with Windows security, making sure that those sandbox services are running with low privilege accounts that don't have access to the database, and that they're completely isolated from the CRM server itself, so that even elevations out of the sandbox couldn't harm your system. We've also shown that we're really thinking about maintainability and the power of choice. We've define an interface that you can really use so that you can build your solution once and deploy it in any CRM environment, whether it be online, partner-hosted, or on-premises. Single build gets all of those. We've also seen that there's some diagnostics capabilities that we've built into the plugin infrastructure. You can use the tracing service to keep track of what's going on in your plugin and really see where the failures happened and how you can fix them in the future. And we've also tried to see that we are doing some monitoring behind the scenes of what the plugins are doing, building up that profile and keeping track of what's actually misbehaving in the CRM system and what's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and that we disable them as we've determined that they're actually acting maliciously or harming the system in any adverse way. With that said, I'd like to hand it back over to Andy to talk about some of the other capabilities in XRM with CRM.
Awesome. Thanks, Nirav. Now, what Nirav didn't tell you was that the bug where the error dialog keeps coming up, that's actually a feature. They wanted to do that first and just say, what if we just kept showing an error dialog? Would people buy that? And we said, I'm not so sure. All right. So anyway, takeaway point from that. Lots of in-depth stuff around Visual Studio and sort of how we're actually trying to support that. Key thing to take away is number one, there's some key pieces about consistency and working with data and sandboxing that we're moving forward and getting better in the product. But number two, it's also about recognizing that those are capabilities that you'll be able to take advantage of, not only for your applications, but if you're an ISV that's delivering, let's say, a hosted service based on top of CRM as a set of capabilities, you now have this capability in the next release of CRM to support people writing extensions for your code. Right? So this is not just about online, although that's a big part of it. It's about giving you an additional set of capabilities to work with to actually put together a solution that's going to last you for quite a while. So with that, we've talked about the sort of general value proposition for rapid application development. We've given you some insights into some of the key things that we're working on for the next release of CRM. What I wanted to do then is bring the time horizon in a little bit and talk about, when we say XRM, what are some of the things that we can do? And you've seen some different examples here. So the sort of pseudo-surprise guest, it's not really a surprise, but what I wanted to do then is go ahead and have, we're very excited to have Shane MacArthur from ADX Studio come up, and he's going to walk us through some very exciting things that they've been doing in conjunction with the team to really pull some of these things together. So, Shane?
Thank you.
So you're going to walk us through a little bit about sort of what the solution is going to look like and how you guys got into this whole jig.
Well, ADX Studio is a company that makes a content management system. We've specialized in making content management solutions that are integrated with Microsoft CRM for a few years now. We believe that as we continue to build more and more highly engaging websites that our customers are touching, that all that information should be put into the CRM. So we've had a lot of experience working with the CRM team and with all their products since CRM 3. So, okay, here we go. That's back, sorry.
There you go.
So what are the scenarios that we're putting together here? We've got a lot of clients that are associations or things like that have run a lot of events and would like to have a better system to manage their events to do it with less cost. So much like the slide that was put together with the scenario of the recruiting solution, this is a similar type of a scenario for building out a conference or an event management system. So this is the demonstration application I'll be showing you, which is not a live system yet, but shortly will be. We're going to be adding more and more compositions of more Dynamics and .NET services in the future.
Now, one of the things we've talked about just real quick is that earlier we showed the portal, right, where the company had their own career site and they wanted to be able to do some development there, and you can imagine sort of a basic ASP developer trying to put that together and by hook or by crook. But the difference here would be that, you know, if thinking about this as more of a solution that you would kind of offer, you'd have to think about how would you actually make that site, that external site that you're available for folks, to be something that you could easily start to get advantage of from a content management system, right? So
correct. Yeah, there's quite a number of challenges for customers. There's a high barrier to put an online portal to build their conference system. So we wanted to lower that barrier and give them a sample website that they can use to customize their scenario with very little ease. Basically, just put a web designer in front of it, give them a new skin, and hook it up to a Dynamics CRM solution. You'll see that this solution actually is composed of quite a number of things. On the far left-hand side, you're going to see the basic entities. There's actually a lot more in the system, but the basic important ones that are related to the conference solution are the events, the attendees, the registration information, and the travel reservation stuff. And that was the business entities that we had in the model. You know, if you're taking this and building this traditionally in a SQL model, you'd be building that into your SQL data model. If you're doing this with the CRM and composing it on CRM, you're still going to build those entities, but you're not going to use SQL tables. You're going to use the CRM entities instead. The application's in the middle. It's obviously got a website that the users are going to go to. It's going to have an application user interface that the users are going to have to use. Now, there's quite a number of personas in here. Along the bottom, you'll see that the attendee on the far right, they're the people who are going to come and register for a conference and go and attend the conference. And there'll be lots of touch points for them along the way. The conference is obviously going to be managed by someone that's coordinating the registration and setting up the conference and organizing the hotels and the car rental agencies that are supported, and all the events are going to happen at the conference. So there's an event manager in this scenario as well. I don't have on here is the speakers and all the other sponsors and stuff like that, but that would be in the long-term solution as well. And of course, you know, people have to get to a conference. You know, it's not always in your local city. So what we've done is integrated with EasyGDS's web searches. They have a .NET service that we can use for all the travel services. So whether that's air, car, hotel, they've got an API that we can use. So we've actually composed a solution with the Dynamics and with their services. So they have travel consultants that would help users with their bookings as well after the attendee's done the online stuff. So without further ado, I'm going to flip to the other conference. So here's the conference website that we've built. Just one little quick note. This is running in Azure. So I'm actually running on the Dev Fabric right now, maybe a little slow, but this is completely running on Microsoft Cloud Services. So we've composed it with CRM Online as well as Azure, and we use our content management system in here to manage the content and render the content on the site, so that the event organizer can manage the content using the CMS. Now, the CMS also needs a database, so we used SQL Server Data Services or SQL Data Services along that. So pretty much this thing runs in the cloud.
So you were able to take your existing product, and with some changes, you were able to then get that to run in the Azure Fabric against SQL Server Data Services and then integrating with CRM.
Exactly, and one of the things we looked at is, CRM4 is really great, the whole story about the power of choice. Some customers are going to want to deploy on-prem, they're going to have a partner to do hosting, or use the online services, and we took the same approach as you guys did, and we made our CMS work with the same power of choice. So you can deploy this whole solution on your IS server, running against a SQL server. You can deploy it in a partner. You can use the SQL Server data services, or SQL data services, sorry, or you can do it quite completely in the cloud with Azure and SQL data services. So this one right now is on the Fabric, so it's like a development instance. The site would have lots of content and news. The scenario I'm going to go through right now is what happens when a customer wants to register for the conference. So the first thing they're going to do is we're going to have to talk about authentication. I don't want to be in the business of authenticating users. I don't think our customers or people that are running the conference want to be resetting user passwords and all that kind of stuff, dealing with people that have lost passwords and stuff like that. So the best thing in the cloud for that is Live ID. So we've integrated this application using the WebAuth Live ID. The nice thing about that is that there's really no cost to the conference organizer for managing those live IDs, and it's a secure solution. The attendees appreciate that too, because a lot of them will have live IDs, and hopefully more will have in the future as well. So it's a fairly easy thing for them. They can do a single sign-on. They don't have to manage an own profile as well. And in the future, I can't type while I'm talking, sorry. In the future, that'll be hooked up with Mesh and the consent APIs that will be there, so that the user's profile can automatically be brought in from Mesh based on a consent basis, and the user won't even have to fill out the profile screen. So right now it's going out to live, doing some authentication, it's passing some tokens around, comes back into the cloud here. The first part of the scenario is going to be a contact form. So we're just going to enter some information in here. I guess it doesn't matter if I type it right, does it? Obviously these are all supposed to be required, but I didn't code that. So I'm putting the city in here because it's going to be used for the next scenario. When you click and click, we're on next here. What's going on now is that this application is going back now, authenticating into the CRM live environment. I haven't used this much, so it's going to take a little bit to get its live ID tokens and stuff like that. So then it went to the CRM. It created a contact record for my users. So it's a way to compose, and we've got membership providers in there that allow you to take your live ID and do a WebAuth authentication with forms login on your website, and then tie it into a CRM contact record, which is a really great pattern to use to be able to integrate external customer-facing websites. So this isn't appropriate for external users for your CRM, but for your external customers, it's one of the nice patterns. Then it went and into the CRM and pulled some content. The event coordinator was able to put a bunch of different conference options in there and conference discounts, and put some content in there. So it drew all this content and the prices from the CRM. The user's going to go to the dinner dance cruise, and we need another additional guest here. And because I registered in time, I'm going to automatically get the early bird discount registration. The next stage is, well, we want to get to this conference. So it actually pulled the city name from where I live. It goes to these GDS services and finds the closest airport. It knows from the CRM that the closest airport is Los Angeles International Airport. We're doing search, so now this actually is a Silverlight application. So there's a little Silverlight application in here that calls back to a proxy service on the solution, and which goes out to the public web services of EasyGDS, does a flight search. They do their thing to bring back flight quotes. It'll take a little bit because flight quotes sometimes takes time.
Now, just to be really clear, so EasyGDS is a live production travel service.
Yes.
Where you can get this information, and so this is all data that you're able to go and work with.
Yeah, so this is public .NET. They follow the .NET platform as well, so it's very easy. You can use WCF or SOAP to grab this, and we're just demonstrating you can also use Silverlight as well, which I haven't spent a lot of time making this a really pretty interface, but you know all the things in data visualization you can do with Silverlight. You can think of how much more you could ramp up this data and make it live and visual.
Yeah.
So I live in Regina. It's a long hop away from Los Angeles, but I'm going to pick that flight. I know you guys are going to go for direct flights, but I don't have that option very often. So So this will, if I clicked it, yeah, I did click it, is now going to go back in the register, or into the CRM and register a reservation for me for the flight, and register all of those legs of that, so that if I come back and I have a problem with my flight or want to change my reservation, the travel consultants have all the information about my legs and can give me the information I need. And it takes a little while. It shouldn't take this long, but.
Now, when you were talking about this with Easy GDS and thinking about some of the interactions here, what kind of feedback did you get from them, or what kind of guidance did you get from them?
Well, the nice thing is, and I was going to go into that a little later, but as part of the data modeling of here, I really appreciated the quick modeling experience within the CRM. I was able to do the data modeling for their flights and the hotel and the car, including of all the details that you would want to have from an event coordination. I did the data modeling, put a couple of forms up. Took me about half a day, maybe 3/4 of a day to organize that. I was able to actually demonstrate, take some screenshots, and actually, well, because it was live, I was able to actually walk them through it.
Cool.
And get some feedback from there, and they gave me some great feedback. Took me a couple more hours to integrate that. So 2 or 3 cycles, and I had the screens that they wanted. Can we have some timeout details? So it's probably because we're dealing with, I have this hooked up to an internal server on Azure, so sorry for SQL Data Services, so we might have a bit of an issue. But the information is there. I want to flip over to the CRM now to give you an example as to what it's in the CRM here.
Yeah.
The CRM interface, you can see, has been customized. It's more along the lines of what you'd want from an event management system. You're not seeing all the typical CRM stuff in here. We've got a few things in here for particularly want to get in on the attendees here. So we can take a look at all the contacts that are in the system that are related to here, and actually my contact should be in here. So there's my contact there. This will open up my contact records. So I've been logged in with Live ID. And just for those that are technical and want to know about Live ID, the Live ID doesn't share your username or your actual Live ID. It shows its own, I guess, a PUID or whatever it's called. But anyways, our integration with the Live ID stores that in the username, and that's really the unique primary key that you'd use to look up the user account.
Yep.
So all the contact record information was stored in there. I registered for the conference on the page, so the conference registration is there. The flight booking is here, and see if it actually got it, but I don't think it did get it all, because it would have had it did get it. So there's all my outbound flights, so you can see it takes me a couple hops to get there, and 2 hops to get back. So I put all the information in there so that we can look at the flight itinerary. And it's the same thing with the hotels, cars, and likewise.
So pretty holistic in terms of the data that you're trying to capture.
Yes. Then the other thing is, which was nice, is that, and I haven't modeled all of the information in here, but there's other things in here for the travel management. The travel consultant can go the conference coordinator can have special deals with the hotel and the car rental agencies and register them in there and make them as part of the search. There's the whole thing with the event and which registrations, which discounts there are. Like for instance, we had an event option there. Remember, dinner dance cruise. We can take a look at that entity to demonstrate that this is the field, or these are the fields that were pulled forward into the website. So there's quite a number of things, different things that the conference coordinator is going to do. Yeah. Because the interface is customizable, you can put them into nice little groupings. The other thing from an architecture standpoint, which is really nice, is the security. So this actually is one CRM and online implementation. It could have been done on-prem or and partner-hosted as well.
So this is live in production right now?
Correct. Yep. And the other side of this, though, is we've sort of designed along a multi-tenant environment so that there could be multiple conferences and multiple organizations in there. So what we didn't want to have to do is design a whole pile of code and data models around implementing security. So we're putting it in CRM. We implemented this in a way using and leveraging the CRM security. So if I go over to the business unit, in CRM, it's got a hierarchical business unit type of an organization, and every user that's in the system gets put into one of these business units, and then the records that are owned by that user are represented in that business unit. So the Wide World Importers Conference here has got a parent organization as well as one conference, and the user that I was using as a proxy account for that website is a member of that thing, that organization. Now if I go back to the customize, the security roles. I only created one security role here for conference organizer, but you can create quite a number of different security roles, one for register, like on-site registration, all that kind of stuff, as well as maybe some people that wouldn't have the ability to change all of the conference information. You go over to custom entities, you'll see instead of all the nice green things that Rob was showing earlier, you've got these half-filled yellow thing. The nice thing about the CRM is you can tell it to have all of these privileges, but also restrict it to just your business unit. So this was the CRM filtering the data for me with no code and no data modeling on my behalf in order to make sure that only that conference organizer saw the data for their conference and nobody else.
So you didn't have to worry about identity, you didn't have to worry about sign-in, you didn't have to worry about securing the data. All of that was done through configuration.
Correct.
Right. That's cool.
So we flip back to the code, besides the error, so let's just get rid of that. The code of the website's pretty straightforward. This is you'll see that, actually let's do the Control Shift Enter. This is an Azure web service. Sorry about the earlier code dog. We made code name. We made this earlier before they changed the name on Monday. It's got its standard roles here. Here's a web role. So this is a web role. In reality, this is a standard web project. This web project can actually be hosted locally in IIS or on a remote IIS server. It is a typical web project that's got master pages with typical stuff, and you'd have our CMS controls in here to bring forward the content. So it's just a mashup of quite a number of different things.
Yep.
We get into the registration process. So the registration process really is the default process for login. So you'll notice in here an ASP login view. This is, again, just another Microsoft logon control. We have a membership system in our CRM developer toolkits. We also sell, besides the CMS, CRM developer toolkit that makes CRM integrations like this very productive and very efficient. So one of those is the membership system. So this actually will work with your membership system and the login. So it's very easy to do that live ID login and tie it into the CRM. The next page was the profile page. So the profile page really was just typical standard labels and text boxes. There's nothing special in the page itself. I want to take a look at the code behind, because that must be a lot of stuff to hook up with the CRM.
It's got to
right?
be more complex than that.
Well, in reality, we just basically make sure that the user's authorized. Otherwise, we tell them to go back to authorize. I probably could have done that in the web config. On the page load, it's simple. You want to get the contact, call contact, look up a username, and pass it the process identity. Or the page identity, and that'll bring back a contact record, and if it couldn't find a contact record, it'll bring back null. So we make sure we found it, and these are all the text fields on the form. So we basically set all the text elements to the contact things from the CRM. So your CRM data is on the right-hand side, your form fields are on the left. On the post back, so when you click on submit or to go to next, we do the same thing. We look for the contact, and if the contact doesn't exist, well, we need to create it, because if this is a brand new user in the system, we call membership create user. So it's pretty simple to create that contact record. And we locate that contact record, and then we do just the opposite. We set the contact fields based on the form fields that are over on here, and then call save on here. So that is enough to get all that contact information into the CRM and redirect to the next page. So you'll notice here a little different style. We've got a contact object. If we go to this object over here, I've made just a few wrapper classes for the CRM entities here. So we use the dynamic entity. We have a convenience wrapper around it, but basically we use the dynamic entity in all of our work here. We have a few convenience methods that we'll basically pull all the things like the full name, the first name, the middle name, and all that kind of stuff out of the CRM, and just do the marshalling between the CRM and the standard .NET data types. So you're really just trying to bridge from a message-oriented web service to more of an object-oriented developer model for the portal developer. Exactly. And then the one method, so because we like object-oriented programming, we decided to put methods on here too. The lookup by username that you saw on the page earlier, we look for it in cache. If we can't find it, we look for it in using the dynamic entity wrapper, the find first by attributes. So we're looking for that ADX username, which was that where you saw I showed that PUID before. It's looking for the username, and it's going to return a contact record. And basically then we insert into cache and return it. So it's a pretty straightforward code. Some of the other things that were a little more complicated, like on that registration page, you had all the options that were available, but then you also had what options the user selected. So there's actually quite a number of different entities in that one. I'm going to go over to the registration page here, or the registration object here, to demonstrate one of the other things that is actually pretty cool. We've got a link provider that works with the CRM, and this actually is one of the more complicated links. This actually is a link statement that actually does a query through an end-to-end or a many-to-many relationship. So basically this one here is looking for, this query here is looking for what the user has registered for. So we're looking for the event options, joining through the temporary table, or not temporary, but the table that joins the many-to-many relationship together.
Yep.
We are looking for where the event option ID is equal to that event option ID. So there's your join statement there. And we're looking for the registration ID of the current registration ID. We convert it to a list, and we can now use it. So this method, because it's bound to a web form, it's easier for us to use it as a list. So we just threw it into a list and put the options here. So we unwrapped the CRM list here and put it back into something that's easier to data bind straight to a web page. And if we go back to that web page, that will be the conference web page, the code behind here. So actually the conference web page here is basically just a couple of repeaters here and an item template. So it's a pretty straightforward code. And in here is where we actually call those methods. So on the page init, we grab the conference, got the contact, event options, and discounts. They're very straightforward code to use. And on the load, we basically do the data binding. So it's actually very easy to do data binding and all the manipulations you need, the full CRUD things within the CRM, just like you would do it from any other kind of a SQL database.
Yeah.
So really what I'm trying to say is that CRM development doesn't have to be different than everything else you're doing. If you're already used to doing this kind of modeling, which you would be in SQL, implementing it and integrating with CRM is not really that much different, and you can use and follow the same type of patterns. There's obviously some different capabilities and a lot more capabilities in CRM that you wouldn't see in raw SQL, so there's a lot of things that you can do, but don't be scared of that. This whole sample was built from beginning to end in less than 3 weeks. Sorry it had the error there, but but it is a fairly functional sample right now. We've got lots of work to do. There's a lot more compositions we want to do. We want to hook up with the .NET workflow services. We want to hook up with SharePoint to do all the PowerPoints and presentation information and all the downloads for the clients afterwards. We manage that within the SharePoint library and make that available to the customers. Hook it up with the Dynamics Online Payment Gateway information for that. So there's lots of good stuff in there to hook up with. So we'll be building this out over the next while. But for me, as an ISV, what I really have found is that designing for CRM doesn't have to cost me any more than designing for SQL. Actually, I find that it costs a lot less because I'm getting all of the value of the CRM. I got all of this GUI design for the users, so the travel consultants and the event coordinators can all go into the CRM, and I didn't have to build any of those screens, and that would have been taking a lot of effort to build all those screens. I get all the workflow in there, all the notifications and the emails that go back and forth. Now that I got those in there, there's going to be lots of follow-up things, so all that information that's in the CRM, other people can get value for as well. And we didn't have to build all that stuff. We can just leverage the value of the CRM as well.
Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time there. All right. So we've got a few minutes left, and what I wanted to do then is, number one, thank you, Shan, for being able to show us some things there. Some very exciting stuff. Very exciting stuff that it's not ether. It's actually things that you can build today running on live services with CRM Online, running on betas of Azure and the computing fabric. So some very exciting stuff that gets put up there. What's I think interesting from my perspective is that we really started this conversation as more of a, hey, how can we start to put some real sort of meat behind some of the ideas that we're talking about here, and it's very quickly turned into, hey, this is really kind of compelling from a partner perspective, and so we want to keep investing and seeing sort of where that's going to go. So some very, very exciting stuff coming out of that. So with a few minutes left, let me just sort of get to some real quick summaries. Number one, again, we talked about sort of false choices at the beginning. I know this is a 400 session, and we've hopefully spent a fair amount of time sort of looking at some of the guts for how to build these things. But to the extent that you folks are the ones that are going back out and having to write some of that code and build some of those things, you have to make that decision, right? When am I going to start? How am I going to start composing these pieces together? And we really want to get you to think about CRM as part of that composition, and an important part of that composition, and less about having to sort of make this false choice between, do I start everything from scratch and reinvent the wheel, or do I have to sort of buy the static product that isn't going to let me do what I want to do? The second thing is that the Azure Services Platform is about unlocking potential. It's about being able to take some of these scenarios like, hey, I've got a travel service, I've got a payment processing service, I've got capabilities for tracking contacts and modeling all these things together. And if I could pull these things together, I can get a lot of value very, very quickly. Right? And that's really what the cloud services are about. It's about being able to lower your costs and help you move faster. And then finally, as I said, think about it as, this is not really just about CRM. This is about taking those capabilities and weaving them into your overall solution model and your architecture. So with that, my build slide is old. A couple of next steps. My request for you as an audience would be, number one, if this information is at all interesting for you, get started. Get started with 4.0. We have CRM 4.0 in the market today. Great product. We're very excited. We're seeing a lot of excitement in the market. We have a lot of information in the next slide that I'll point you to real quick about how you can start to dig in on those if you haven't already. And then secondly, we are going to be working on sort of started spinning up our pre-release programs for the next release of CRM going into next calendar year. So stay tuned for more information on that front. Some quick links. I'll just sort of show these real quick. You can come back and look at these when on the recording. The big things I would point to are we do have a developer center on MSDN that I would encourage you guys to take a look at if you haven't already. And for those of you that are not yet engaged, obviously we have the CRM team blog where we're fortunate enough to have folks from the team actually blogging, and we also have a number of MVPs that also will blog with us on that site. So with that, I'll do the standard shill for evaluations and recordings. I'm actually pretty impressed with the way the recordings are turning out this year. So I think it's actually turning out really great with the Silverlight control and the seek ability. So definitely take a look at that. If you go through the conference control on the PDC website, you'll be able to get back to the session and sort of cruise around there. And then last but not least, obviously, please fill out evaluation forms. There's always sort of the running screens around in the speaker lounge about sort of who's doing what. So please fill it out. Let us know how we did. Let us know how we can improve. With that, we've got a few minutes left, maybe 5 minutes or so. We'll go ahead and have Nirav and Shan come back up real quick. If anybody has any questions, I would point you to the mic in the center of the room, or just to save time, if you want to go ahead and yell it out, we'll see if we can repeat it back. But mic is preferred.
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions.
Yes.
What happens if I upgrade from CRM 3 or CRM 4 to CRM 5?
So the question's really about upgrade, and if you invest in CRM 4, will those things come forward?
Yes.
Yeah, so yes is the short answer. We spend quite a bit of time actually investing to make sure that the things that you are doing in 4 will come forward. Yeah. We benefit from the metadata approach that we're taking, so it's actually easier for us to pull those things forward.
Even plugins written for CRM 4?
I'm sorry?
So even plugins written for CRM 4 will be supported in an online version?
Yes.
Okay. Second question, will the next version support custom master pages?
So will the next version support custom master pages? To be determined at this point. We're looking at different ways. We're excited about some of the things we get with Azure and cloud services, and so obviously at that point it could be anything you want to do from an ASP perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi guys, my question is actually for the gentleman from ADX Studio.
Yeah.
Yes.
The link support for Link to CRM, is that Bart de Smet's Link to CRM project, or is that something different?
No, that's something our developers wrote.
Really? Okay. Now for the CRM team, can we please have Link to CRM support in 5.0?
Point taken and noted. That's part of why we wanted to show it today, was we're listening.
Thanks.
In the keynote on Monday, they kind of kept showing this diagram that had Azure and then 5 boxes sitting on top of that. One of those were the CRM services.
Yep.
I was kind of waiting to hear, what are those going to be exactly?
What are those going to be? So I'll give you an answer. It may or may not be sufficient for you, but let me put it this way. We've shown you a lot of things today, right? There's a lot of rich capabilities that you have in the product right now. And so if you think about how you would actually try and take advantage of those capabilities to build out your own solution, so think about if Shan was a partner, what does he have to buy in order to get those types of capabilities? So when we talk about CRM services, those capabilities are part of what we look at that platform level. Now, in terms of what are you buying, how much is it, all those sorts of things, that's all part of what we're still working out. But I would also point you to the session tomorrow that we have on payment processing through Dynamics. And again, it's a business application service to be able to do payment processing and post to eBay and things like that. But those are services that you may want to compose into your solution. There's also some things that we've announced with CRM Online in terms of the ability to integrate online marketing campaigns and to get responses back from that when you're doing like search marketing, for example, and then have those come back into your solution. So again, when you start looking at things like online marketing, on payment processing, on core platform capabilities like that, think about a lot of those capabilities as part of sort of those services that you'd be able to take advantage of. Now again, from a what am I buying, how much is it, where do I go, those are all things that we're still in the process of working out.
Thanks.
Question. In CRM4,
Yep.
We could go to the entity level and basically make an entity read-only for a role. And I think you were showing some of those switches up there that you could do.
Yep.
In 5.0, will we be able to take that down instead of at the entity level to the field level so that we can make certain fields read-only for certain roles?
So the question's really around what I'll just call shorthand field level security. We're certainly evaluating that for the next release. No word as to whether it's in or out at this point, but we're certainly looking at it.
Thank you.
And did we answer your question about transaction from earlier when we were talking?
You were talking about using transactions inside of plugins here. Will those same transactions be supported through the plain old SDK?
So again, at this point, that's one of the things we were thinking about. But right now, it's primarily through plugins.
Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions? No. All right. Well, so, Aaron's going to step up.
Just a real quick one, sorry. The CRM tracing framework, do you
Yep.
tend to support that outside of plugin context, like within the app domain, if we're writing some ASPX pages?
Say it again.
The CRM trace framework,
The
can we
tracing
use
framework.
that outside of the plugin context?
So we're looking at for custom workflow activities and things like that to
Right.
incorporate that as well.
Okay. And then the second question was, how did you get around the problems of sandboxing with CPU cycles and memory limitations? Because I thought that was going to be in .NET 4.0 and never actually made it.
Yeah, so right now we're still on .NET 3.5, so we've got our own instrumentation kind of tracking the different pieces of
You, like,
memory
monitor it.
consumption and things like that.
You monitor it, and if it goes too high, you
Yep,
kill it off.
exactly.
Like that. And will the isolatable work on-prem too, or is that
Yes.
only
Yeah.
meant for?
Yep.
Okay.
So it
Yeah, so-
works on-prem, partner-hosted, or online.
Just real quick, I'm very new to this CRM stuff, so a naive question. It looks to me like, from what I saw today, that for plugins, that the trace is basically your capability for debug. Is that the only way one debugs?
So that's kind of one of the pieces. We're looking at other pieces as well, some potential Visual Studio integration, debugging tools, things like that.
But for right now, it's just the trace, correct?
That's kind of the first stab we took at it, but there are definitely other ideas that are floating around still.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. Yeah, so just to be really clear on that one, you do have the ability, obviously, to do debug when you're running an on-premises. The isolatable is really about what happens when you're running in a hosted environment in the sandbox and doing tracing there. So you've got full, breakpoint support and things like that when you're running it like in debug mode and trying to develop. Okay, so the crowd is thinned because everybody's now leaving and it's 6 o'clock. But again, thank you very much. I appreciate you guys staying late. I'm hoping that we were able to get to some interesting topics for you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of PDC.